Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
We've all seen the different commercials out there that are marketed towards brain health and making sure that we stay on top of our cognitive abilities, which of course is really important because as we get older, we know that those neuronal connections can sometimes get a little cobwebby, and we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that as we get older, we have the full functionality of our brain, and we know that there are many different things that can impact our cognitive decline through the aging process. We can look at chronic disease states. We certainly can look at the impact of diet when it comes to brain atrophy, for example, which is the shrinking of the brain. And we know that diet plays a huge role into that. But I want to focus on a couple of different nutrients. One blended together can really give a power punch of brain boosting ability today. I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and I want to talk about cocoa and grapeseed. And specifically, we have this really wonderful formulation, which is known as Clarity. And as the name implies, this is what we're going for. We want to have clear thoughts. We want to be able to be responsive to our daily routine. And this is something that I think is really important for people who are younger, because many times we think about the aging process and brain dysfunction occurring only later on in life. But we certainly know that that is not the case. We understand that people who are younger and under high stress situations, whether it's at home, at school, at work, can certainly start to experience many of the different negative implications of a deteriorating brain capacity. And I put it that way because that's basically what it is. We know that when we have an overactive endocrine system brought upon, say, for example, from adrenal stress that releases all of these different compounds and chemicals within the body, this can have a real negative impact on our cognitive abilities. And I've talked to so many people who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s where they think, I don't have to worry about brain health until I get into my 70s or 80s or beyond. This is something that's not a problem. And I always say, no, this is the time that you want to make sure that you are on top of your brain and that you are giving your brain the nutrients that it so much desires and requires in order to get through the hecticness of your everyday routine. So our True line of products, if you go to our website and you look at the True Clarity, this is an awesome blend of cocoa flavanols, so the power of cocoa. Now remember, we're talking cocoa, the actual powder that comes from the cocoa bean itself. We are not talking about smashing up a milk chocolate bar and putting it into a container. We are looking at the powerful antioxidants that that cocoa bean itself is actually yielding. Now, this is combined with the power of grapeseed extract. Now, what do we know about grapeseed? Well, we know grapeseed is just really high in terms of OPCs. And what is an OPC? That's an oligomeric proanthocyanidin. And this is important because we know that when it comes to our exposure to these powerful flavonols, these powerful antioxidants that come from the food world, we usually are not obtaining enough of this. And this is certainly true when we think about people who are in their 20s and 30s who maybe are not quite adhering to a healthy diet. For many people, you don't think about your diet and, maintaining your health until something kind of goes awry. Then you think, oh, maybe I need to make some dietary adjustments, or maybe I need to make some lifestyle modifications. But what we do know is that if we start in our teenage years and in our 20s and our 30s and we are following a standard American diet, we are adding insult to injury when it comes to our cognitive abilities. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you should be really sharp. This should be your time where your brain is firing on all cylinders. And if you are feeling that sluggishness or that kind of that brain fog, and many people have this because of diet and because of the high stress of which your lifestyle may include. So this is why I love this formulation. It is a blend of the cocoa flavanols along with grape seed extract. And this is a powder, so it's really easy for you to incorporate it into your daily routine. So you take 1 scoop of this and you mix it up with a little bit of water and away you go, because this is going to be beneficial not only for the brain, but we can also look at the multitude of benefits that the True Clarity is actually yielding you throughout the entire body. Now, we know that cocoa has been shown to be very beneficial when it comes to even the support of proper blood glucose regulation. So we're not having those peaks and valleys of our blood sugar throughout the day. But we also recognize that when it comes to grapeseed extract, that this really provides an awful lot of support for the cardiovascular system when we think about the blood vessels themselves. So this is something that I think is really quite important for people of all ages to stay on top of. We definitely don't want to wait until something is wrong. And if you are in that age group, if you are in that 20 to 30-year-old age group, you should care about your brain. You should think that your brain should be really, really responsive at this point in time in your life. And there are so many numerous studies out there now that have really honed in on the power of cocoa flavanols. In the Frontiers of Nutrition journal back in 2017, they talked about how enhancing human cognition with cocoa flavanols is at the forefront of a lot of the nutritional research that is being conducted at this time. We understand now that within the general population, it's not just the aging process. It's not just age-related cognitive decline. We are recognizing that there are many different reasons as to why people are having cognitive difficulties, even at younger ages. And so they started to look at the nutraceutical benefits of functional foods. And so there's a lot of different functional foods out there that we can kind of narrow down. We can look at beets, for example. We know that's very, very beneficial for the vascular system. But the cocoa in particular is really quite impressive because we know that the cocoa has this potential to really influence neurocognitive function. And study after study have continued to show this. There have been multiple epidemiological studies suggesting that the intake of the high-power cocoa flavanols can provide an enormous amount of support when it comes to overall cognitive function. And this is really quite key. Now, some of these studies were short-term studies, but there have been many of these studies that have tracked the intake of cocoa flavanols over the course of 10 to 12 years, which is really very impressive. Looking and seeing, wow, look at the difference that the brain function is when we have a high amount of these cocoa flavanols. We understand that it has this power to help to enhance cognition, and it really is very, very beneficial, not just when we are in our 70s and 80s, but when we think about our younger decades of life and making sure that we are doing everything in our power to allow the brain to thrive. And this is really, really key. If we go back in time and we look at an easier way of life when, things weren't as hectic, for many people, if we could go back in a time capsule and look at the brain scans of people in their 20s and 30s back then versus looking at the brain scans of people in their 20s and 30s now, you would see that true impact that stress and poor diet is actually playing on the deterioration of the neurons within the brain itself. So we know that the cocoa powder, these cocoa flavanols, which have this powerful, powerful antioxidant capacity to it really can do so much when it comes to enhancing the way that the brain is reacting and responding to oxidative stress. And we know it's that oxidative stress that does this long-term damaging effect. Now, when you partner this up with grapeseed extract, which we know grapeseed extract, we can look at the Journal of Neurotoxicology and see that the consumption of grapeseed extract actually had the ability to prevent amyloid plaque buildup, which is absolutely remarkable because we're talking about inflammation in the brain. We're talking about Alzheimer's disease. And this journal was back in 2009. They were looking at those powerful OPCs, those oligomeric proanthocyanidins, and those polyphenols from that grapeseed had the ability to actually inhibit the beta amyloid buildup and to reduce the actual inflammation within the brain. So we have to think to ourselves, well, that's pretty darn impressive, right? Yes, of course it is. And then there was another study that looked even further at the different ways in which those grapeseed proanthocyanidins actually were working in terms of the different inflammatory pathways and the way that it had this ability to really battle off that oxidative stress. And there's a lot of different ways in which oxidative stress can generate this damage within the brain. So when we think about the poor dietary intake of antioxidants coming in a natural form, so say, for example, you are following more of a standard American diet, you're doing more of the processed foods, fast foods, things along that line, your intake of naturally occurring antioxidants that would be coming from fruits and vegetables are probably not adequate. And then you put yourself into a situation where you have higher environmental as well as internal stressors, which really can deplete out your antioxidant stores. Now, I really wish that we could get to a point in this country where we could just test. It'd be part of your standard annual testing where you would go in and you would say, hey, what's my antioxidant status right now? Let's look at my vitamin C. Let's look at my superoxide dismutase levels, my catalase, my glutathione levels, my CoQ10 levels. But unfortunately, we don't do that here. So what we do know is that for the most part, most people walk around in a high inflammatory and high stress environment, which means every single day we are doing this minuscule amount of damage at this cellular level. Well, every single day, that minuscule amount grows and grows until it becomes incredibly problematic. And you look and you think, I'm only 30 years old, and why am I struggling to just do basic things? Because my brain seems scattered. It seems unfocused. And then we can take a step back and say, oh, well, I've been starving my body of these antioxidants to be able to fend off all of these free radicals. So I certainly encourage people to check out the True Clarity. It's such a really cool blend, having the cocoflavanols, which we know have been studied extensively when it comes to brain health, in combination with the grapeseed extract. So all of these different antioxidants and the different constituents that are derived from both of those combine up in this formulation to really give you this brain boosting punch, which is so required for all of us. And we have to be wise to that. We have to recognize that we need to be our own best health advocate. And at the end of the day, the more that we do these little steps, like adding in True Clarity on a regular basis as part of your routine, can make exponential differences when it comes to the way that your brain responds to stress, when it comes to the way that your brain actually is aging. And I always say our goal at the end of the day is to age gracefully. So definitely check out the True Clarity. That is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health Podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Now, do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health, and we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health Podcast.